Robert Harrison had built his restaurant chain from nothing more than a dream and his grandmother's apple pie recipe. At 62 he owned 43 locations across 3 states, but something had been troubling him lately. The quarterly reports showed declining customer satisfaction at his flagship location in downtown Springfield, and he needed to understand why. So on a quiet Tuesday morning in October he traded his tailored suit for worn jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He walked through the glass doors of Harrison's family diner as just another customer looking for breakfast. The morning rush was winding down and only a few tables remained occupied. An older gentleman read his newspaper over cooling coffee while a young mother tried to coax her toddler to eat scrambled eggs. Behind the counter stood a woman Robert guessed to be in her late 50s. Her graying hair was pulled back in a neat bun and her uniform was pressed despite showing signs of many washings. Her name tag read Margaret, and there was something about her gentle movements that reminded him of his own mother. Margaret approached his corner booth with a warm smile that reached her tired eyes. "Good morning," and she said, pouring coffee without being asked. "What can I get started for you today?" Robert ordered the daily special and watched as Margaret moved between tables with practiced efficiency. She remembered that the businessman at table 6 liked extra cream in his coffee. She knew the elderly woman by the window preferred her toast barely golden. With each interaction Margaret seemed to anticipate needs before they were spoken. When a construction worker accidentally knocked over his orange juice, Margaret was there with a towel and a replacement glass before he could apologize. "Don't you worry about it, sweetie," she said, "happens to the best of us." Robert found himself studying this woman who seemed to embody everything he had hoped his restaurants would represent. During a lull Margaret returned to refill his coffee. "You're not from around here, are you?" she said with a knowing smile. Robert felt caught, but Margaret's expression held no judgment, only curiosity. "Just passing through," he replied. "This seems like a special place." Margaret's face lit up. "Oh, it is," she said, looking around the dining room with genuine affection. "I've been here 8 years now and I've watched families grow up in these booths. The Hendersons over there," she nodded toward an empty table, "brought their baby girl here every Sunday after church. Now she's in high school and still orders chocolate chip pancakes." As Margaret spoke, Robert noticed something that made his chest tighten. She was quietly slipping dinner rolls from the bread basket into a small paper bag. The movements were subtle, almost unconscious, but Robert's trained eye caught them. His first instinct was disappointment, then concern about theft. But something about Margaret's manner made him hesitate. She wasn't hiding the action from customers, only being discreet. When his meal arrived, Robert complimented the food, genuinely impressed by the quality. "Margaret makes the best biscuits this side of the Mississippi," said the construction worker from the next table. Margaret blushed at the praise. "My grandmother's recipe," she said modestly. Throughout the morning Robert watched Margaret's interactions with growing admiration. She slipped extra bacon to the businessman who looked like he'd missed breakfast at home. She brought coloring books to restless children without being asked. She listened patiently as the elderly woman shared stories about her late husband. But Robert also noticed Margaret continuing to quietly collect leftover bread. His business mind wrestled with what he was witnessing. Was this employee theft or something else entirely? As the lunch crowd began arriving, Robert made a decision that would change everything. He approached Margaret at the counter. "Excuse me," he said gently, "I couldn't help but notice you collecting bread throughout your shift." Margaret's face went pale and her hands trembled slightly. "I can explain," she whispered, looking around to make sure no other customers were listening. "Please don't report me to Mr. Harrison. I'm not taking anything that would be thrown away anyway." Robert's heart clenched as he realized his assumption had been completely wrong. "Can you tell me what you do with the bread?" he asked softly. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she stood straighter, as if gathering courage. "There's a homeless shelter 3 blocks from here," she said. "They serve dinner every night, but they never have enough bread to go with the meals. The leftover rolls and biscuits from here would just go in the dumpster anyway. So I started bringing them over after my shifts." Robert felt something shift inside his chest. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "About 2 years now," Margaret replied. "Ever since I started volunteering there on weekends and saw how the residents' faces light up when there's fresh bread with their meal." It reminds them of better times, you know, when someone cared enough to put bread on their table. Robert thought about his own journey from struggling young man to successful businessman. He remembered the kindness of strangers who had helped him along the way, the diner owner who had given him his first job despite his lack of experience, the supplier who had extended credit when cash flow was tight. "Margaret," he said carefully, "what if I told you that you didn't have to worry about taking that bread anymore?" Her eyes widened. "You mean you won't report me?" "I mean," Robert said with growing emotion, "what if we made this official? What if Harrison's family diner started a partnership with the shelter?" Margaret stared at him in confusion. "How could you arrange something like that?" Robert took a deep breath, knowing this moment would change both their lives. "Because Margaret, I'm Robert Harrison, and you've just shown me what I've been looking for in all my restaurants." The coffee pot in Margaret's hand began to shake. "Mr. Harrison," she whispered, "I'm so sorry, I never meant to steal." "Margaret," Robert said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You weren't stealing anything. You were giving everything." Over the next hour Robert learned more about Margaret than any performance review could have revealed. She had worked in restaurants for 30 years since her husband died young. She had raised 3 children on waitress wages, sending all of them to college. She had never missed a shift in 8 years. She knew every regular customer's name and their usual orders. And for 2 years she had been quietly feeding people who had nowhere else to go. "Margaret," Robert said as the afternoon sun streamed through the diner windows, "I have a proposition for you. I want to make you the community outreach coordinator for all my restaurants. Your job would be to identify ways we can better serve our communities, starting with an official partnership between Harrison's and local shelters." Margaret's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Mr. Harrison, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Robert replied, "and help me remember why I started these restaurants in the first place." 6 months later Robert stood in the kitchen of his flagship location watching Margaret coordinate the daily bread delivery to 3 local shelters. But the program had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Surplus vegetables went to a food pantry. Day-old desserts brightened the lives of nursing home residents. And Margaret had trained staff at all 43 locations to identify community needs. The quarterly reports now showed the highest customer satisfaction scores in company history. But more importantly, Robert had rediscovered the heart of his business. It wasn't about profit margins or efficiency ratings. It was about creating places where people felt valued and cared for, just like Margaret had been doing quietly for years. On a quiet Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, Robert found Margaret training a new server. "Remember, Sarah," Margaret was saying, "every person who walks through that door has a story. Our job isn't just to serve food, it's to serve kindness." Robert smiled, knowing that his restaurants were finally living up to the dream he had started with decades ago, all because one waitress had shown him that the smallest acts of kindness could feed more than just hungry bodies. They could nourish the human spirit itself.